Gather around and welcome back to another edition of Todd Talks College Football. And this week, folks, we're going to break down the 5 thoughts on Week 12 in college football. And what an exciting week it was. We saw some upsets. We saw some shakeups in the conferences. And we're really getting down to the nitty-gritty here as we have 2 weeks of the regular season left. And then the championship games before this all culminates into who's going to make the college football playoff and who's not. So let's go ahead and get this broken down and what we saw this last week in college football. Thought 1 on Week 12 in college football. Well, let's start off at Texas A&M, where we saw quite the game of 2 different halves here. That's right, folks. We had South Carolina roll into Texas A&M, and that first half was absolutely a South Carolina beatdown over the Aggies. This thing was at 30-3 at halftime, and it was just an absolute demolition of the Aggies defense there by South Carolina. But as we all know, this is a 2-half game, and in the second half, the Aggies came out and threw up 28 unanswered points to turn this thing into a 31-30 victory there for the Aggies, keeping their undefeated streak alive here going into week number 13. Quite the scene. We had Shane Beamer, head coach of South Carolina, come out after the game and say that his team wasn't celebrating or anything at halftime. They just knew the score was 0-0 and they needed to go out and win the second half. Well, I think the video shows a different story. Shane Beamer's running off at halftime, doing this number, pointing to the crowd and all that. And well, his team was definitely not ready to come out in the second half and play the same kind of football that they played in the first half. They gave up 28 straight points to Texas A&M to end up losing the game 31-30. And keeps the Aggies' undefeated streak alive for the season. Just absolutely incredible performance by Marcel Reed in the second half. This team was just, it was destined to win this game, even though they were losing there by 27 points at halftime. They just were not going to be stopped in the second half, and you got to give it up to Texas A&M and Marcel Reed. A lot of teams would have just folded at that point, but this team definitely came back. The question is, how the hell did Texas A&M give up 30 points in the first half? And this is the problem that a lot of people have seen with Texas A&M. This defense is just marginal at some points in the game. They've given up over 40 points to Arkansas. Now they give up 30-some points in the first half to South Carolina. That's not been playing very good football. But the bottom line is Texas A&M gets the win, keeps their chances of getting to the SEC championship game alive, pretty much in the driver's seat after we talk about some other things that happen here. I think, with Texas is the big game left on their schedule in 2 weeks, and how's that going to transpire? I think at this point, Texas A&M could still lose that game and be quite fine going into the SEC championship game and get a big win over right now it looks like Alabama, even though Alabama lost yesterday, which we'll get into a few minutes. So bottom line here is Texas A&M definitely showed some heart, and at the end of the day, they dug themselves a big hole, and they were able to dig out of it and get that 1-point win at home. So great win for Texas A&M. At the end of the day, winning's all that matters when it comes to November, and Texas A&M surely did that. Thought 2 on Week 12 in college football. We saw Oklahoma roll into Tuscaloosa yesterday and take a 2-point victory home with them back to Soonerville, and they ended up winning this football game. Honestly, if you look at the statistics, there is no way that you could look at the statistics and say Alabama lost this football game, but yes, they did, folks. Alabama only gave up 212 yards total in the game to Oklahoma. Alabama outrushed Oklahoma, which was a shocking stat coming out of the game, considering how bad Alabama's been rushing the ball this year. And Alabama only committed 2 penalties. The problem was they turned the ball over. That's right, Ty Simpson threw the interception. We had the fumble there by Ryan Williams. We also had the missed field goal attempt before half. So Alabama just made critical mistakes. But by all aspects of stats, Alabama should have rolled away with this game, but not yesterday. Oklahoma was ready for it. They pressured Ty Simpson into making bad throws, and they held Alabama scoreless in the fourth quarter, which is what Oklahoma needed to do to win this football game, and that's exactly what they did. So where do we sit with Alabama right now? Well, Alabama has 2 losses to Florida State and Oklahoma. They still control their destiny to get to the SEC championship game. So, they got to beat, I think, Eastern Illinois and Auburn. I'm not so sure that they can go on the road and beat Auburn this year with the way that Auburn's been playing defense and getting pressure. And Ty Simpson definitely is not very effective when the pressure's in his face, and that showed yesterday. It's actually showed over the last few weeks, but it didn't hurt Alabama in the couple weeks prior to this, but it did yesterday for sure. So very nice win for Oklahoma. John Mateer had a pedestrian game overall, but the bottom line here is it doesn't matter how you play in the game. It matters if you win, and Oklahoma won this football game. That's 2 years in a row that Oklahoma has now beat Alabama. Hopefully for Alabama, Oklahoma won't be on the schedule next year, so they can get a little break from losing to the Sooners, because that's pretty much what they're on here. They're on a losing streak to the Sooners, a new SEC team that's kind of now dominating Alabama, and that's not good for Alabama. But Alabama still holds a lot of their own destiny here. So we're going to find out exactly how good Alabama is when they roll into Jordan-Hare in a couple weeks and have to play a spunky Auburn team. Not a great Auburn team, but definitely spunky and can beat you, especially when they're at home. And I think DJ Durkin's going to have a game plan for Alabama to pressure Alabama, and we'll see if Ty Simpson can live up to the standards. But there's a very good chance, folks, here that Alabama doesn't make the playoffs if they can't get out of that game in Auburn in a couple weeks. So it'll be interesting to see. Oklahoma has to go on the road to Missouri. They have games at home against Missouri and LSU. They win those 2 football games. Look for Oklahoma to be in the college football playoff. I don't think you're going to be able to hold them out with wins over teams like Michigan and Alabama on the road. And their loss came to Texas when John Mateer was coming back from an injury. And the loss to Mississippi looks pretty good here, considering that Ole Miss ended up beating Florida yesterday, outlasting them 34-24 in that football game. So I think Oklahoma, with the win against, again, Missouri and LSU, is going to punch their ticket into the college football playoff. So there we go. Big win for Oklahoma on the road at Alabama, 23-21. Thought 3 on Week 12 in college football. Let's move down to Athens, Georgia, and last night we saw a thing that most college football fans don't like to see, and that is a Georgia team that's just getting hotter and hotter and hotter as the season goes on. And last night they absolutely whitewashed Texas, especially in the fourth quarter. This game was 14-10 heading into the fourth quarter. It looked like Texas might have had a little momentum scoring there and cutting this thing from 14-3 to 14-10. But never fear, Kirby Smart is here, and he absolutely dominated in the fourth quarter. Again, putting up 21 unanswered points there for the Georgia Bulldogs. They did the onside kick that really faked out Texas in that spot. And, Kirby had some, he was going for it on fourth down, and he was not playing around with this Texas team. Arch Manning he looked okay, but he still had too many overthrown balls, too many positions, and I just don't think they're running Arch Manning enough. I mean, he didn't have very many carries in this football game. At one point, I looked in the third quarter, he had 2 carries for -9 yards. I really feel like rushing the ball in the quarterback position is a way to, keep Georgia's defense at bay. But they just did not want to rush Arch Manning yesterday. And again, he didn't look super great. He played okay, but it wasn't a very good performance overall, and surely not a good enough performance to beat an improving every week Georgia team. So, at the end of the day here, Georgia's a team that no one wants to see get better and better as we get into the playoffs, and that's what we're seeing here. They don't have any conference games left. They're 7-1 in the SEC. They have to play Charlotte, I think, and then they turn around and they go to Atlanta to play Georgia Tech. I really think Georgia Tech is going to be a menace here for Georgia because of Haynes King rushing the football. We'll see if Georgia Tech can actually stop Georgia, but I think Georgia will have a little bit of trouble, and I think that the end of the day, if Texas would have ran the quarterback more in Arch Manning, they might have had a little bit more success against this Georgia Bulldogs defense, but they didn't have that in the game plan, and it didn't work out well for Texas. So, again, Georgia ends up ripping Texas 35-10 yesterday in Athens, and quite frankly, folks, this Georgia team is just getting better and better, and that's not something the rest of college football wants to see. Thought 4 on Week 12 in college football. Got quite the race shaping up in the American Conference. I've been telling you this all year. The American Conference team that gets out of this thing alive should be the playoff team for the Group of 5, the Little Six. And yesterday we had a very interesting game. We had the USF Bulls traveling on the road to Navy. USF had all the momentum to try to get this thing into the American Championship game and play for that conference championship and get to the college football playoff. But unfortunately, they ran into a buzzsaw, and that's right, the buzzsaw was the Navy midshipmen in their running game yesterday. Blake Horvath came back from his injury. He had an okay game, not great passing the football. He didn't run the football as much as he normally does, but the Navy midshipmen rushed for 338 yards against South Florida and just absolutely brutalized that defense with the running game. And at the end of the day here, they end up winning 41-38. And it's a great win for the Navy midshipmen, considering this keeps their playoff hopes alive and the American Conference Championship alive. We now have Navy, Tulane, North Texas, and East Carolina all sitting with one loss in this conference. And we don't have these teams playing each other over the next few weeks. So it's really going to see who can win the games ahead of them and not trip up their chances. I can't even imagine how this tiebreaker is going to look. But we have Navy going playing Memphis here on Thanksgiving night. We still have Tulane, North Texas, and East Carolina that have 2 games apiece left to play. I know East Carolina is going to UTSA. UTSA very seldomly, if ever, loses at home, especially in conference. So this is going to be quite the breakdown here on who can get to the college football playoff or a chance to get to the college football playoff. And the number, we'll call it the number 12 seeding in that, and can that team come out of the American Conference, or are these teams still going to beat each other up too much and let James Madison in, who ended up winning this weekend? We also had San Diego State, who got beat by Hawaii 2 weeks ago, then come back in a pouring down rain there yesterday in San Diego and beat Boise State. So at the end of the day, it's going to be real interesting to see how this Group of 5, who gets in, but I still think it's the American Conference champion. Just have the roughest, toughest schedule of anybody here. Overall, the conference is very deep in terms of these quality teams. So it'll be interesting to see. I think the way it's looking now, it very well could be Navy against North Texas. Tulane obviously can sneak in there, and East Carolina also. But it'll be interesting to see exactly how this all folds out and plays out, and who can end up winning this American Conference and maybe getting the bid to the college football playoff. Midshipmen win 41-38. Thought 5 on Week 12 in college football. Well, on Friday night we saw Oregon rip through Minnesota 42-13, and that's not really why this is Thought 5 on this week in college football. It's really because a couple of these plays that occurred in this game and how these officials reviewed these, and they gave Oregon 2 touchdowns in that game that, quite frankly, I still don't think were touchdowns. We had Oregon, great run by Whittingham, barreling over people, but he drops the ball right before he goes in the end zone, fumbles it around, grabs it back. I don't think he possesses the ball for long enough to say it was a possession of the football, refumbles the ball out of the back of the end zone. They end up giving Oregon a touchdown here. But I think if you go watch that video in slow motion and in full speed, you can honestly say that he's never really recovered the football. I saw people say, oh, he took 4 steps after. He did not take 4 steps after. He barely got 1 step in after. So if you didn't see the play, he's kind of running. The ball hits his pad. It kind of comes loose. It bobbles up. He's bumbling it around as he runs into the end zone. He grabs it for a split second, and then he releases and fumbles the ball out of the back of the end zone again. And at the end of the day here, I don't think he had possession of the ball, clear possession of the ball after he re-grabbed it after the initial fumble or the bobbling of the ball. But that wasn't even the worst call, in my opinion. Then we had another call where it was a touchdown called on the sideline in the end zone. It clearly looked like the receiver was out of bounds before he actually made contact with the football to catch it. They reviewed that. No one thought during the review, if you listen to the analysts on TV, they thought it was clearly out of bounds. I thought it was clearly out of bounds. 99% of the world thought it was clearly out of bounds. But the Big Ten refs thought that it was in bounds, and it was just a very, very questionable call. Now, at the end of the day, neither one of these calls were going to change the football game. They could have, but more than likely Oregon would have scored on the one that was out of bounds that they gave him a touchdown on. But the one that he did fumble out of the back of the end zone could have been a touchback. Minnesota could have came down and did anything. But really, honestly, at the end of the day, it wouldn't have made a big difference. Oregon was still going to win this football game. Minnesota's just not that great a football team right now. And it just is really scary that these types of officials in this are going to be in the college football playoff. And I'm just really, really nervous. If you're a college football fan and your team's in the playoff, how are these officials going to officiate these games? Because it's just been absolutely terrible for most of the year. But bottom line, at the end of the day here, Oregon does rip apart Minnesota 42-13. Extra. My son's college football career is over. That's right. He played for a D3 school, Wilmington College, in case you didn't know. And yesterday was the final game of his 4-year career. So I just wanted to give him a shout out and tell him how proud I am of him that he ended up making it through 4 years of college football. Not a lot of guys end up getting through all 4 years, especially in Division III and even Division II, where there's really no money being paid here to anybody. This is just for the love of the game. And a lot of guys have come and gone, and a lot of guys quit through the seasons. But there he is. He made it all 4 years, was a starter the whole season this year in his senior year, started on many units last year in his junior year, but really, really a tremendous accomplishment there. So way to go to my son, who did finish up with a heartbreaking loss at 28-27 against Capital University, a team I know they wanted to win very badly against, but they ended up just a little short. And it ended up being a 3-7 season, but much improved over last year. They had 4 games this year that they very easily could have won the game. Possession of the ball late in the game to win it, and they just couldn't get the ball in offensively. So, again, very proud that he was able to do this accomplishment. And it's not easy at any division in college football to play 4 years. And great job there, son. Quick hitters. We saw USC ricochet their way past Iowa. That's right. USC still only has 2 losses. They got the trip on the road next week at Oregon. It's going to be a really big game. Lemon yesterday, another big career game yesterday with 153 yards receiving. This is his 4th 150-plus yard game receiving of the season. Absolutely tremendous. But it really boils down to they got that pass, Iowa threw it, bounced off, ricocheted right into USC's hands, giving them a chance to win this game. So great win for USC, 26-21 at home against the Iowa Hawkeyes. There was a lot of concern that the Duke Blue Devils may win the ACC and finish up at 9-4, and the ACC might not even get a team in the college football playoff. Well, yesterday Virginia crushed all that when they went out and they beat Duke at home. 34-17, I believe the final score was. And Virginia finally got back on the winning track after the loss the week before. But this team is really starting to play well. We're going to talk here in just a second about, well, let's just do it now. Georgia Tech snuck out of Boston College on a last-second field goal and ended up winning that football game to keep both Virginia and Georgia Tech at the top of the rankings here in the ACC. I mean, beat North Carolina State. It wasn't even a close game. North Carolina State just beat Georgia Tech and has been playing pretty decently. So at the end of the day here, if Virginia and Georgia Tech can win out, Georgia Tech has to still play Pittsburgh, who did lose yesterday to Notre Dame, but they still control their destiny in the ACC since they have Pittsburgh still has to play Georgia Tech and Miami, so they surely can get their way and play their way in the ACC. But Virginia definitely looks like they have control of this conference right this second. We'll see if they can win two big games back-to-back. Again, they did go on the road and beat Duke, but we'll see if they can win again next week. They still got Virginia Tech on the schedule, which is a rivalry game. So bottom line here, this ACC is still not shaken out on who's going to be in this ACC championship game and potentially the college football playoff, although I do think they have a much better chance of getting in the college football playoff now that Duke has lost and no chance of Duke winning the conference. So there you go. The ACC is still going to be a juggernaut here for the rest of the season to see who actually gets in to that championship game and who can get in that college football playoff. Well, folks, let's go all the way back to, I think it was Tuesday night, and that was Kent State and on the road at Akron. This is a real game. These two schools do not like each other, separated by just a short distance of about 20 miles. And the bottom line here is Kent State ends up winning this football game 42-35. They had a big lead in the fourth quarter, but gave it up. Akron came all the way back to tie it up, and we ended up seeing Kent State outduel Akron at the end of the day, 42-35. And, you know, as I'm a Kent State dad, I'm really, really happy that Kent State won this football game. So great job, Kent State, getting that road win that's been eluding you for a while. So Kent State wins on the road at Akron. Well, let's stay in Ohio here. And we had Cincinnati, man, playing for a lot yesterday. A chance to play BYU next week, beat BYU, and get into the Big 12 championship game potentially if they could do that. But unfortunately for them, Arizona came rolling into town. That's right. Arizona is a pretty good football team this year since they've improved a lot since last year, and they really came in and took care of business and beat Cincinnati here on the road up here, in Ohio and Cincinnati. And that was a big, big win for Arizona and an absolutely devastating loss for Cincinnati and any chances or dreams that they had of making the college football playoff. Still don't know who is going to win this Heisman Trophy, folks, but Jeremiah Love yesterday had a big, big game against Pittsburgh. He rushed for 147 yards. He had that great carry where he had the spin move, took it for a touchdown early in the first quarter. And, Notre Dame never really let off the gas on Pitt. Pitt ended up scoring to make it 34-15 or something like that at the end of the day. But really, Notre Dame took care of business from the beginning to the end of that football game. And Notre Dame looks to be on the road to making a college football playoff here the way it stands now. We'll see if they can get through the next couple games, which should not be a problem. But bottom line is Jeremiah Love still looking like a potential Heisman Trophy candidate. And that run yesterday was a good Heisman Trophy moment. It looks great in the highlight reel. And the bottom line is Jeremiah Love, folks, is the best running back in college football. No question about it. Let's move back over to the Big 12. And since Cincinnati lost that game and potentially Cincinnati could beat BYU next week, that leaves Utah as a potential foe against Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game. Texas Tech went on cruise control yesterday and just blew out UCF. Utah went on a rampage and just beat down Baylor yesterday, like 55-24. They couldn't do anything wrong in that game. It would be real interesting to see how this Big 12 is going to shake out. But I'm thinking if I'm a Big 12 fan, I want to see this Texas Tech versus Utah rematch and see if Utah can get the win that they lost earlier this season at home to Texas Tech. But it's going to be real interesting to see how this shakes down. And it really all depends tomorrow or next Saturday on Cincinnati and BYU. Can Cincinnati come back, get over this loss to Arizona, and beat BYU, which could put Utah right back into that Big 12 championship game against Texas Tech, and see who can get that win. I really do think that that's the only way I'm not saying the only way, but that's the biggest way that the Big 12 can get two teams into the college football playoff. I just don't think if BYU loses two games at Texas Tech at the end of the season in the fashion they lost last week, that they would get in. But we'll see what happens. But Texas Tech ends up cruising 48-9. And again, Utah just hammers down Baylor yesterday. Wasn't even close. And Baylor's not a bad football team. But bottom line is the Big 12, much like the ACC, is going to come down to the final week here to figure out who is going to get in this championship game and potentially a college football playoff spot. And the last thing we're going to talk about real quick is the Michigan Wolverines sneak out of Wrigley Field with a last-second field goal to beat Northwestern. This Northwestern team was pesky. They were down, pretty good. They came back. They got it close. They ended up taking the lead, and they end up letting Michigan get down the field in the last remaining seconds of the game and top off a game-winning field goal there in Wrigley Field there. One of the last games at Northwestern before they get into their new stadium, which is going to be exciting to see for them. But Michigan sneaks past and beats Northwestern, keeping their playoff hopes alive. Obviously, Michigan is going to need to dissect and dismantle Ohio State in a couple weeks to get there, but it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out. All right, folks, well, there's our show for today. 5 thoughts on Week 12 in college football. An exciting week. We got another one coming up next weekend. We'll see some, the SEC doesn't have a lot to offer us next week with some of their teams playing Division, 2 FCS schools, lower Division 1 schools. But we do still have some really interesting games. Again, it's going to be really led off by USC at Oregon. And how's this game going to shake out? And can the Trojans win that game? And if they can, they're definitely on the way to a college football playoff spot with 2 losses. We'll see how this ACC shakes out next week. We got Pitt rolling into Georgia Tech. See if Georgia Tech can actually beat a team convincingly enough here against Pitt, which is a good football team, even though they didn't look that great yesterday against Notre Dame. So at the end of the day, another great week of college football is just ahead of us. Don't forget, gather around in ALTT. We'll see you soon.